Think of the Mercedes-AMG G63 as the antidote to boredom. Based on the already exciting Mercedes-Benz G-class, it adds AMG's usual tweaks to the 577 horsepower twin-turbocharged V8, creating an Uber G with a base price of over $180,000. It's quicker than the Ford Bronco Raptor in terms of road speed, and even bested the Cadillac Escalade V by a few tenths in our 60-mile test. Still, with 9.5 inches of ground clearance, 20-inch wheels, and Rodeo Drive's legendary triple-locking differentials that make easy work of the toughest expansion joints, it's an extremely capable off-roader. The interior is a leather-wrapped and tech-rich container worthy of the Mercedes-AMG badge, but maintaining that boxy profile forces compromises, including a bolt-on upright dashboard and less cargo space than you might expect. An even wilder Fork 42 model offers long travel suspension, heavy-duty portal axles, and more than 13 inches of ground clearance for buyers with hard-to-satisfy automotive urges. In this video, we will talk about the 2024 Mercedes-Benz AMG G63, which conquers hearts with its off-road conquest and its appearance that adds beauty to the beauty of the city with its luxury style. In addition to what we have counted, it has managed to become a family, camping, and a beautiful travel car in its own right, with the possibilities it offers. On the other hand, with its powerful engine and high performers, it does not fail to make power shousu against other cars. Where this vehicle ranks, this huge muscle car ranks 8th in the ranking of the best mid-size performance SUVs. You can see other cars from the picture. What's new for 2024? The 2024 AMG G63 is a carryover model, a refreshed G-class with more aerodynamic styling and new powertrain choices, is scheduled for 2025 to herald the arrival of the new EQG G-class EV. Mercedes-Benz hasn't yet revealed any specifics, but more efficient powertrains, including a hybrid, are possible. Pricing and which one to buy. The price of the 2024 Mercedes-AMG G63 starts at $184.15 and goes up to $358.15, depending on the trim and options. Though every Mercedes-AMG G63 comes standard with 20-inch wheels, adaptive dampers, a front brush guard, leather upholstery, heated front and rear seats, and 3-zone climate control, most buyers consider the $184,000 plus base price the cost of a blank canvas. There are myriad customization options, and it's a not-so-well-guarded secret that AMG will indulge buyer requests of nearly any nature as long as the check clears. That said, we'd opt for the seat comfort package to get the multi-contour seats with ventilation and massage, and the AMG Trail package to unlock the proper tires for off-roading. Engine, transmission, and performance. The G63 relies on a twin-turbocharged 4.0-liter V8 engine, making 577 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. A 9-speed automatic funnels torque to the all-wheel drive system. 4MATIC in Mercedes marketing lingo, with low range and triple locking differentials, center, front, and rear, to ensure maximum grip should the driver put a wheel off-road. No slouch, the 5,800-pound G63 rocketed to 60 miles per hour in just 3.9 seconds in CD testing, shaving more than a second off the time of its G550 sibling. The AMG treatment extends to the suspension, fine-tuning it to handle the extra power on-road while retaining off-road capability. While it's much improved over the previous generation's solid front axle setup, the G's stability control keeps a steady hand on this top-heavy brute, limiting it to 0.75 of grip. on our 300-foot skid pad test. Towing and payload capacity. The G63 has a maximum towing capacity of 7,000 pounds, and trailer stability assist software is included. Though it's improbable anyone would utilize a G63 as a primary tow vehicle, the capability is there if you need it. Fuel economy and real-world MPG fuel efficiency is but an afterthought for the G63, a fact the EPA confirms with its 13 MPG city and 16 MPG highway estimates. On the plus side, the G63 matched its EPA highway rating of 16 MPG in CD's 75 MPG highway fuel economy test. For more information about G-class fuel economy, visit the EPA's website. Interior, comfort, and cargo. Although the G-class's basic square-shouldered profile remains, the interior benefits from the same high-quality materials and tech and convenience accoutrement that dot the Mercedes lineup. There's leather upholstery, a 12.0-inch digital instrument panel, cup holders, and a surround view camera system. Heated front and rear seats and leather-bound AMG steering wheel also make the standard list. Taller drivers and passengers will find plenty of head and leg room in both the front and rear. Around the back of the G-Class, there's still no power lift gate, and you'll need to be in good shape to open the side-hinged gate, which has a full-size spare tire mounted on it. With the rear seats up, you'll have 38 cubic feet of cargo space. Folding them down, 60/40th split provides nearly 69 cubic feet. Infotainment and connectivity. Each G63 includes a 12.3-inch infotainment interface with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay and navigation as standard equipment. A Burmester surround sound system, 3 12-volt power outlets, and a household AC outlet in the cargo area help keep things civil. Also included is a 3-year subscription to Mercedes-Benz's connected car services, which provides basic features such as remote engine start and stolen vehicle tracking. Options include Wi-Fi and a rear entertainment system, which features dual 10.0-inch touchscreens, each of which has its own USB, auxiliary, and HDMI ports. Safety and driver assistance features. The Mercedes-AMG G63's driver assistance aids are similar to the features offered elsewhere in the corporate lineup. It includes adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, and blind spot assist. Curiously, the adaptive cruise control system does not offer extended restart capability in stop-and-go traffic, requiring a tap of the accelerator to resume movement if stopped longer than 3 seconds. For more information about the G-Class's crash test results, visit the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, and Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, IKIHS websites. Key safety features include standard automated emergency braking, standard lane keeping assist, standard adaptive cruise control, warranty, and maintenance coverage. Mercedes-AMG's limited and powertrain warranties are on par with other high-end SUVs. Instead of complimentary scheduled maintenance, however, there are prepaid maintenance plans available at extra cost when you purchase your G63. Limited warranty covers 4 years or 50,000 miles. Powertrain warranty covers 4 years or 50,000 miles. No complimentary scheduled maintenance. Yes, this huge, luxurious off-road family and mid-size SUV, the 2024 Mercedes-Benz AMG G63, is sure to conquer the hearts of everyone. It is a car that is very nervous, frightens those who see it from afar, and is also a car that everyone desires to own. We are ending another video full of information. If the video was useful for you, we are waiting for your comments and likes. You can subscribe to the channel to be informed about new videos. See you soon.